Hello, everyone. My name is Joaquin Budakides, and I'm a professor and chair of adolescent studies at California State University, Fullerton. But more importantly for our purposes here, I'm the program specialist for the network's new Equity in Action grant program. I'm going to talk about this Equity in Action grant program in general, but more importantly, and perhaps more usefully, I'm also going to walk you through the online application process. So what is it? As I said about a second ago, it is a new grant program with the goal to invest resources back into the system to identify, understand, and disrupt inequities in the CSU. The intention of the grants is to fund faculty, staff, and student faculty proposals that showcase innovative thinking, action research, and evidence-based practice that specifically address equity-related challenges. So what are we looking for? I just used the word action research, or the phrase action research, in the previous slide. Let me explain a little bit about what we mean. We really want to preference projects that focus on measurable, on-the-ground activities already in process that you believe could be improved upon or expanded upon with some grant money, or that are ready for action soon after funding. Put another way, what we don't want are proposals that essentially are like traditional research projects that you would seek funding for, where your long-term plan is to collect data, publish with that data, and maybe inform future practices. We are more interested in funding actual on-the-ground activities that can demonstrate a closing of equity gaps regarding student success outcomes. And so therefore, these grants are not designed for purely research activities. What are the program's overall goals? Well, our goals are to support current efforts at CSU campuses to close equity gaps in student outcomes in cases where the funding can expand or improve such efforts. We also want to launch new efforts at CSU campuses to close equity gaps in student outcomes. We also want to generate a knowledge base of supported equity actions across the CSU and to allow for evaluation of which of these efforts are most effective or impactful, as well as accessible to the network community. In other words, we hope to gather information that can benefit everyone, including people that aren't on your campus, who are going to be able to look up these projects and their outcomes and determine whether those efforts would be generalizable to their own campus and their own campus community. We also want to learn about challenges in implementing equity actions across the CSU campuses via progress reports and final reports from funded activities. It's always beneficial to know what also doesn't work. We are in a system that has limited resources. All of us have limited time and limited energy. So it's very valuable to find out that certain efforts may not produce the kinds of outcomes we were expecting, or to understand the challenges that those efforts faced as a way of addressing those challenges in subsequent efforts. We want this Equity in Action grant program to fund proposals that are possible within a kind of range of funding. And so we're looking to grants that are up to $20,000 for a single grant, probably in the range of $15,000 to $20,000, and those would be CPO directly to each campus. The duration of these awards will be 18 months from the project start dates. And of course, the project start would not begin until after you were notified that you won the award. So important dates. The RFP, the request for proposals, is already out. It went out on November 1st. And you'll have until February 1st, 2022, by midnight, to complete your online proposal and have it submitted. And we hope to send out award notifications in early of May 2022. If you have additional questions, which I'm sure many of you will have, you can contact me directly at my email that's listed there, or Dr. Bianca Maffei, who's the director of the CSU Student Success Network. All right, now what I would like to do is bring us to the online portal and walk you through the application process. Here we go. So now I am at the online proposal site, And that link will be available in all of the promotional materials that were sent out regarding this grant, including a recent email that went out broadly to our network community. So if you've had any interaction with network activities, if you've been in a middle leadership academy team, if you worked within the network and facilitated a team like that, if you've attended any of our conferences or convenings or workshops, you should be on this email list and will have already been notified about the opening of the Equity in Action grant main portal here, main application portal, and also where to find the RFP. And so when you first land, you are told up front some of the materials that you're going to need to be able to submit to have a completed application. That includes a letter of support from a supervisor. If you are working within a center or other program that has a program or center director or supervisor, then you need their approval as well, and you'll be asked for their contact information and name. If you're a student applying, you will have to be able to provide the name of a faculty member who will be overseeing you as well, and their contact information. And if you are a faculty member, you will need to provide approval from the dean of your college within which your program sits. You'll also need to provide detailed budget information for the proposed project. So make sure that you have all those materials handy when you're finally ready to do the application. And finally, a campus or department chart string where project funds will be deposited into via the CPO process. And so you start with entering your name, your first and last name, as you can see here. And I'll go ahead and type in my name and my email address. And I'm doing so because I won't be able to go to the next pages in this application form unless I actually complete these questions. So you cannot, in most cases, skip a particular question and move on. There is skip logic built into the application process. So for example, once you identify yourself as a student, you're not going to get a question that would be relevant for a faculty member, and vice versa, and the same with the situation if you're staff. Then you'll identify your campus, and the campuses are in alphabetical order. So I'll go ahead and find my home campus, Fullerton, and select that radio button. And then my role on campus is faculty. And then that will change a couple of the questions I'm now going to see once I've identified myself that way. And so now I will identify my college dean, Dr. Cynthia Greenberg, and her email address. And all of this, of course, is public information. And so I'm not worried about sharing it with all of you on video. And now we get to the actual narratives, where you're going to be doing most of the filling in and what's going to take most of the time as you complete the online proposal. See, as you see here, we do have a word limit. We're trying to keep these brief, not just because it's easier for us as reviewers, and we have a panel of expert reviewers which will review these applications based on the general topic that's being covered, but we also want to make it easier for you. We don't want this to be a laborious process. We want to make the sort of bar of entry as low as possible so that those of you that have never applied for a grant feel more comfortable doing so. And that way you don't expect that you'll have to devote an inordinate amount of time or have to have some prior experience and expertise in grant writing in order to be a potential winner of this particular award. And so by setting that limit, we're kind of giving you a boundary, right, to work within, rather than leaving it open and having you include a lot of information that may not have been necessary, right, and making the process more onerous. And so in this first narrative, we want you to describe the proposed project. We want you to indicate the particular nature of the equity issue regarding student outcomes that you are addressing. So be specific here. Unfortunately, there are a lot of equity challenges within the CSU. And so the more specific you are, the better it is for us to be able to evaluate it. We want you to talk about any data, any relevant demographic information that would, again, help us understand the specifics of the equity challenge, and also It'll help us understand the urgency of the problem and the scope of the particular challenge you're interested in addressing. And then we also want you to talk about the specific actions that your proposed project would engage in to positively affect this equity issue. Obviously, that's the name of the game. We're not interested in just another, even detailed description of the equity challenge. There's a place for that as well. Of course, it's very important to fully be able to identify, describe the particular equity challenges on your campus. And there are probably equity challenges on your campus that don't get the attention they deserve and aren't as well understood. But that's not enough for this particular grant. Remember the action word in the label of our program, equity in action. And so you're going to have to, if you want to be competitive for the grant and have a chance of winning the award, really describe the actions you're going to be engaging in that are going to help close or improve that equity issue or equity challenge. And so right now, I'm just going to type test in here, because I don't want this video to be too long. In the next narrative box, you're asking you to describe your assessment plan. This is very important. The key thing here is some way that you are going to try to ensure that whatever it is you're doing is or is not having an impact. And when I say ensure, what I really mean is help us understand and help yourself understand that the particular actions you're engaged in are either having the impact that you wanted or are not. That's what we mean by assessment. So it's some way of determining whether you're getting closer to your goal, right? And obviously there are levels of assessment. And if you come from certain disciplinary backgrounds, you may have access to and competency in very high level kinds of statistical assessment, for example. That's not a requirement, but you have to have some kind of plan to determine what the impacts of your actions are. And I think that is something you yourself would want to know. The more detail you can describe, the better. I think it's also important to point out that you want to make that assessment plan realistic insofar as the resources that you have available. And so if it sounds like you're proposing an assessment plan that seems to go way beyond the resources that are going to be available to you to conduct that assessment, even counting the monies you might win as part of this grant, then that is going to be a big question mark for us. So be realistic, be as detailed as you can be, and work within the competencies that you have regarding assessment. We don't expect you to all be assessment experts, but we do expect you to have some kind of plan to determine the impact of the actions you're going to engage in. So I'll put test there as well. The next narrative. Describe any past or current equity-related activities targeting student outcomes that you were or are involved in on campus. We expect that many of you that are drawn to this particular Equity in Action grant proposal are going to be individuals that have already engaged in previous efforts that are related to diversity, inclusivity, and equity. However, some of you may not be, and this might be the launching off point for you. I want to just say up front that not having prior experience will not disqualify you. It doesn't mean that if we read that you have no prior experience, we immediately won't consider funding your particular project, but it may change the way we think about the plan you're proposing. For example, we would judge a particular proposal differently if that proposal was describing some more involved, more technical, more higher level, challenging type of action, but it looked like the proposal was being put together and the project leader had prior experience, right? We would judge that differently. That would make more sense. Yes, this person's proposing something pretty involved, but then again, they know what they're talking about. They have this prior experience. They have these competencies that they've demonstrated. Whereas on the other hand, if you're proposing a project that is more circumscribed, that is narrower in scope, then you wouldn't necessarily have to articulate a lot of prior experience. So it's the type of question that will help us judge the other elements of the overall proposal. And we're also kind of curious. I mean, this is all data for us as well. We want to know what types of prior efforts the people that are applying for these grants have already engaged in. The next narrative. please address the issue of sustainability in regard to your project. How would the efforts or outcomes of your project continue to address your goals beyond the funding limits of the grant? Well, $15,000 to $20,000 is a significant amount of money, but we also recognize that it's not going to be enough money to necessarily continue the effort you engage in over multiple years, right? And so if you are proposing a project that you think would have a longer shelf life, that you imagine working through multiple years or becoming more institutionalized within your campus, then you need to discuss a bit about the sustainability. What other resources would you be trying to assemble in order to continue the project past the funding that we can provide? Are you going to be seeking funds from other entities on your campus? Do you imagine applying for other grants? Do you see other ways, perhaps, of continuing the project, even in a perhaps different mode, that wouldn't require a lot of additional funding? The point, though, here is to articulate something about the issue of sustainability so that we know that you're thinking about it. Because obviously, we would love for these projects to have a long life, to continue having impacts in some way, to generate information or to generate structures within the campus that continue to have a longer term impact, because of course, these equity challenges are not going to disappear, right? Unfortunately, we know this is the case, and we know that we have to have sustained efforts to address the equity challenges across the CSU. So the more you can articulate about that, the better we're able to evaluate the kind of sustainability of your project. And here we have the proposed project budget summary. Here you're going to indicate the amounts of money that you believe you are going to be spending on particular items. So student salaries, for example, which are allowable. Faculty salaries and staff salaries are not. What are allowable, however, that could end up incentivizing faculty and staff to participate in a project that you've put together are incentives like stipends. And so providing stipends, let's say, for participants in a workshop to perhaps incentivize them a bit to participate and join, that is certainly allowable. You might have supplies, materials, equipment needs. Please indicate the amount of money you would need for those as well. Other types of project expenses that you can indicate in this box as well. And the important thing, once you've indicated the amounts, of course, is to justify each of those line items regarding the proposed spending. So next to each of those items, you want to have some kind of description that makes it clear to us exactly how that money would be spent, and perhaps also why you need that particular amount of money, of course. And we also encourage you to please reference the budget restrictions that were outlined in the original RFP. And here, there's kind of a sample information put in there. You will delete that as you're writing and fill in your own information, but that gives you sort of an idea of the kinds of things we're looking for, and it also gives you an idea as to the level of detail. Here you'd put in your department chart string or campus chart string where the monies would be sent to. And each of your campuses, of course, is going to have an appropriate budget or administrative staff who knows what these numbers are and can provide them for you if you're not familiar. And finally, here is where you're going to upload your information that indicates approval from your supervisor and overall sort of support for the project as well, so that we know that the people that you have to report to and the people that would be that you're responsible to have an idea of what it is you're doing and what it is you're proposing. And so you can upload that document here. Student applications will require both faculty and dean approvals. And these can be, relatively short letters. A letter that simply indicates that that person is aware of the proposal and that they have, and that they support your proposal. Ideally on letterhead, on department, program, college, campus letterhead as well. And then any additional documentation that you think would help us evaluate your project or would help further describe the project, but for which you couldn't find a place to really put it in the online proposal, go ahead and upload that information. It may or may not be necessary, but it can't hurt, especially, like I said, if you feel like this is a relevant piece of information, but couldn't really figure out where to include that information in the actual online proposal. And here it's stopping me because it's asked me to upload these documents. So let's upload some documents just for kicks so we can move on. All right, I think that covered it. And maybe I'll put in some values here. I suspect that it's going to want some values in there. So I'll just put in some test numbers. And you can see as you are adding the numbers, the particular dollar amounts, it's also totaling it for you automatically. Let's see if now we're allowed to move on. And then you get the thank you message indicating that your application was complete and it's now in our hands. And as I said, we're going to do our best to notify applicants of the award notification by early May of 2022. I hope this was helpful. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email me directly, Joaquin Boudakidis. My email is, again, you can see it here on the last page of the online proposal. It's also in the original RFP, and I've also seen it in a bunch of other promotional materials and information emails that are going out about our Equity in Action program. Good luck to all of you who are applying. I'm really eager to see these proposals. I'm sure they're going to be wonderful, and I look forward to funding as many of them as possible. Take care.